A poor old woman disappeared into the deep forest to find firewood, but what she found changed her fate forever, helping a tiger give birth with her bare hands. It became something that the whole village will never forget. This story is full of mystery, magic, and heart-wrenching truths. Are you ready to face the secrets of the forest that no one dares to tell? A poor old woman helps a tiger give birth in the deep forest, not expecting that the conclusion will shock everyone. In the deep forest, the thick fog covered the tall trees, so that sunlight could barely reach the ground. An old woman in tattered clothes walked through the grass barefoot. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a bamboo tube filled with water from the stream. The whistling wind blew through the leaves like the whispering of spirits. As she was about to rest under a large tree, a low growl came from the thickets to her left. She froze, her heart beating rapidly. The sound rang out again, firm and powerful. The old woman walked slowly. She saw a large female tiger, lying there panting heavily. Its belly was distended, its eyes filled with pain. It was about to give birth, but something seemed wrong. The smell of blood reached her nose. The tiger's rapid panting mixed with the soft cries of the tiger cubs that had not yet seen the light. The old woman immediately started helping. Her bare hands were covered in hot blood. The tiger's fur was damp. Sweat poured down her cheeks as she exerted. Finally, the little tiger cub escaped, squealing softly. The tigress gasped, licking her cub's face softly. The old woman slowly retreated. The tigress stared at her, her eyes deep and human-like. Then she raised her paw. Under her feet there was something. It was an old gold bracelet, engraved with ancient patterns. The old woman looked at it in confusion and picked it up hesitantly. As soon as the bracelet touched her hand, an image flashed through her mind. It was of her, but it was not a poor old woman. It was a noble woman in ancient costumes. A whisper echoed in her head. "You are the descendant of the forest guardian." She collapsed, her hands clutching her head, her face pale. Heat flowed through her body from the bracelet to her heart. Her body trembled. Her skin began to turn into faint tiger stripes. Her eyes began to glow orange. The tigress lowered her head, as if she was showing her respect. A roar echoed in the air, not from the tigress, but from the old woman. The roar was powerful, echoing throughout the forest. Flocks of birds flew away in droves. Monkeys screeched. The vegetation around them seemed to tremble. The air became still as if time had stopped. The old woman looked up. The eyes were no longer human, but the eyes of the forest spirit controller. She stepped out of the thicket. The tigress and her cubs followed her, leaving behind only footprints on the damp soil, and the shadow of something that was no longer just the old woman. The sound of leaves rustling softly, like the trees whispering words of welcome. The smell of moist soil mixed with wild orchids wafted into her nose. The old woman stopped standing under a large tree whose roots were tightly intertwined, like a door to another world. A glowing green light began to surround her body. The footsteps of many animals began to sound from every direction. Deer, monkeys, wild boars, and exotic birds walked out of the shadows. They showed no fear. Instead, they crouched down calmly. She reached out her hand. A golden butterfly landed on her finger. It flapped its wings slowly, as if in communication. Then a voice rang out in her heart. "You have awakened, the new guardian of the forest." The old woman closed her eyes tightly, her heart beating so hard that it almost exploded. All her senses were awakened, as if they were being reborn. Old memories began to return. Images of ancient rituals, circles of fire shaking ground. The voices of people shouting her name. It was not the name she knew, but a legendary name. Tears flowed unconsciously, not tears of sadness, but tears of the awareness of an unavoidable fate. She turned to look at the tigress. It lowered its head again. The little tigress walked closer and closer to her legs, familiarly. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shook slightly. A low, deep sound like breathing came from beneath the forest. The smell of ancient incense wafted into the air. From beneath the roots, a crack appeared, and a white light rose up. It was neither hot nor cold, but it gave the feeling of standing in the middle of the universe. The old woman looked up to receive the light. Her tattered clothes slowly transformed into an ancient patterned cloth. On her forehead, there was a glowing symbol, a widened tiger's eye. The roar sounded again. The entire forest fell into silence. It seemed as if everything was waiting for her final command. She swallowed slowly, knowing that her time as a poor old woman was over. And what lay ahead was not just a new chapter in her life. It was the beginning of something no one could have prepared for. She stepped into the circle of light. The light wavered slightly, as if acknowledging her arrival. The surrounding trees began to lower their branches. The leaves rustled as if they were praying. The ground in front of her cracked, revealing an old stone staircase covered in moss. A strange fragrance wafted from below. It was both alluring and terrifying. The old woman glanced at the tiger cub. It stopped at the edge of the pit, not daring to follow. The tigress slowly retreated. She was left alone. She took a deep breath. She stepped down the stone staircase. Each step made a sound like dry bones breaking under her feet. A chill began to seep into her skin. The stone walls on the side were carved with images. They were images of many women, with faces like hers. Every image had glowing eyes, and in each image, their hands held something. A dim light from a green flame floated above their heads. It was smokeless, but it smelled like burning human bones. Finally, she stopped at the foot of the stairs. In front of her was a circular stone hall. In the center of the room was a giant tiger head stone platform. Its stone eyes glowed golden. The old woman stepped forward to stand at the center, the sound of her heart beating loudly in her chest. Then the whisper returned. Those who hold the bloodline must choose. Accept the power of the forest, or let it perish with you. She clenched her fists tightly. Blood began to flow from the cut on her palm, dropping onto the stone platform. As soon as the blood touched the surface of the stone, a terrifying roar exploded from beneath the ground. The stone platform shook, and the light in the room shot up. She screamed, not because of pain, but because something was starting to penetrate her body. Her muscles convulsed. The bones in her body moved, changing shape. The skin began to turn into distinct tiger stripes. The hands turned into sharp claws. And inside her head, the voices of everything in the forest were talking to her at the same time. The sound of the wind, the sound of the roots underground, the sound of night birds, and the sound of animals that no one has ever seen, all penetrated her head, overlapping into a language that she had never learned, but understood. She stood amidst the power. Her eyes turned golden yellow like the light of the full moon. Her claws extended. Her tiger-striped skin glowed faintly in the darkness. Then she heard another voice. Different from all the others, this voice was a young girl's. Soft but clear. "Mother, help me." The old woman's body twitched. Her heart felt like it stopped beating for a moment. She looked around but saw no one. The voice rang out again. "Mother, I'm in the forest, dark, cold, scared." The old woman began to pant. A memory flashed through her mind. The face of a little girl with long hair, wearing a muddy dress. Her big round eyes were full of tears. She had a child. That girl disappeared in the forest decades ago. No one had found her body. No one knew what happened. Her hands were shaking. The claws slowly retracted. The energy circulating in her body began to stir. The girl whispered again, "Mother, I am still here. I have been waiting here all along." The old woman's eyes widened. She whispered her child's name softly. "Molly, Molly, my child." From the side wall of the hall, tree roots began to spread out, revealing a dark and narrow secret passage. The smell that wafted out was like the smell of a child's body. A faint smell of talcum powder, mixed with the smell of wet soil. The old woman turned her back on the stone altar. She stepped into the passage without hesitation. Her heartbeat was strong and heavy. This time, it was not because of fear or sanctity, but because she was about to find the truth. A truth that she had never been ready to accept in her entire life. The corridor was winding and narrowing. The walls around her seemed to breathe. Her heartbeat echoed in the silence. Each step she took seemed to be going deeper into her own past. The smell of baby powder became clearer. followed by a soft laugh. The voice was familiar, as if it came from another dimension. The old woman's eyes began to fill with water. A dim light appeared ahead. It was a pale blue light, floating above the ground. Around the light were scattered old dolls. Some had dry bloodstains on the cloth. She knelt down, her hand touching one of the dolls. It was the one she had sewn for her child with her own hands. "Molly," her voice trembled. Then the light began to gather. It took the shape of a small girl. Pale skin, empty eyes. A sad smile was plastered on her face. The old woman moved closer, but the figure retreated. The child's voice rang out again. "Mother left me here." "That's not true. Mother searches for you every day, every night." Tears streamed down the old woman's face. She reached out her hand, but all she could feel was the cold air. "Mother never forgot Jasmine. Mother still smells you, hears you until today." The little girl's eyes began to change. From empty to trembling, a small hand reached out to touch the old woman's cheek. That cold touch was strangely warm. "Mother, remember your promise. Mother said she wouldn't let you be lonely." The old woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Mother remembers. I won't leave you again." From around her, blue light merged. It became a line of light that wrapped around both of them. Then the girl's body slowly, calmly, and tightly. The old woman flinched slightly when the fusion ended. She opened her eyes again, and in those eyes, there were two lives, mother and child, living together in one body. She stood up firmly. Although her body was old, her posture was filled with an unprecedented power. Her eyes were calm, yet deep and filled with sadness. The sound of tree roots shaking from behind her. The tiger headstone platform began to break apart piece by piece. Inside revealed a small stone box. On the lid was engraved with the name, Molly. The old woman walked back and stopped in front of the box. She reached out and touched it gently. The lid opened by itself without any force. Inside was the girl's hair, the small braid she had cut when her child was still alive, along with the pale red beaded necklace that she always wore around the child's neck. She picked up the necklace, holding it tightly in her hand. Memories rushed like a storm, but this time there were no tears, only the sound of her still breathing, and the understanding that everything that happened, it was not just fate, but it was a test that the forest had chosen for her to experience. Suddenly, the voice from the ground rang out again. When the heart of the guardian merges with the pure mind, there will be a balancer. No one can fight against it. The stone floor beneath her feet began to glow. A bright golden light swirled around her body. The tiger stripes on her skin became clearer. The voices of both animals and trees merged into one. You are not just a forest guard. You are the mother of all life in the forest, and death cannot take it away anymore. The old woman stood still in the light. She did not say anything, but her heart beat steadily. And in those eyes was the power of those who lost and chose to forgive, to protect everything that was left in this world. The light around her gradually faded, leaving only a faint glow that seeped into her skin. The cracked stone floor reconnected. The stone hall was silent, as if nothing had ever happened. The old woman turned around and walked back up the stairs. Her footsteps were firm but calm. The green flames gradually extinguished one by one, following her steps. When she returned to the forest, the sky above her head opened up. The moonlight shone through the trees. The thick fog disappeared, as if the forest had accepted the change. The tigress and her cub were still sitting in the same place, waiting. When they saw her return, they lowered their heads, their eyes filled with humility. The old woman sat down under a large tree. The wind blew, the sound of the leaves playing a lullaby. She closed her eyes, smiling faintly. In her chest, she could still hear the little girl softly saying, "Mother, I am here." Her heart was no longer alone, and from that day onwards, no one in the village dared to go deep into the forest, because every full moon night, she would hear a soft roar, followed by the laughter of a young girl, echoing in the shadows of the trees that no one dared to mention. The laughter was light but cold, it flowed with the wind, like a warning from the past. Sometimes, the villagers who went out to find food in the forest at night claimed to see the shadow of an old woman walking beside a beautiful tiger. No one dared to approach, even though there was no danger. Some feeling told them that what was in the forest now was no longer just animals or humans. The children in the village were forbidden from walking outside the area after dusk, but some stubbornly ran after the ball that rolled into the tree line and came back out with wide eyes. They said that a tiger skin woman gave them sweets and said, "Don't be afraid, the forest won't hurt you if you love it." The village elders started to light incense in the middle of the square every night. They asked for forgiveness from the forest. They placed a bouquet of flowers under the biggest tree, which is now called the Tiger Mother Tree. The seasons passed. The village changed. But everyone still remembered the story of the poor old woman, whose real name no one knew anymore. She became a legend. She became a shadow in the mist. She became a guardian with a mother's heart. And the tiger's eyes stared at everyone from the silent shadows. People began to call her by a new name, Mother of the Forest. No one dared to speak loudly. But when there was the sound of a broken tree, the sound of a faint breath from the grass, they would whisper that name with respect. The dry season came earlier than every year. The trees were withered, the streams were receding, but the herds had not yet migrated. They were in the forest as if they were confident that someone would protect them. Then one day, smoke rose from the edge of the forest to the south. Heavy machinery moved in. The sound of chainsaws and the shouts of people from the towns were heard. They came with a plan to cut down trees, build a road. No one in the village dared to stop them. No one dared to approach the man in clean clothes, holding the plan in his hand. But on the first night of camping, the roar came from all directions. Not the sound of a single tiger, but the sound of the whole forest. The tools stopped working. The lights in the tents suddenly went out. Some workers rushed out with guns. And then she appeared. In the darkness, the tall figure of an old woman with tiger-striped skin, standing under the full moon. No words, no threats. Just a calm gaze that met the eyes of all the workers. And in that instant, they knew they shouldn't be here. The morning came. The camp was deserted. The machinery was abandoned, with the tanks still full, and the whole village knew immediately. The forest is not forgotten, and the guardian is still here. No one dared to move the abandoned machinery. It had rusted, vines wrapped around it. It seemed to be swallowed up by the forest piece by piece on purpose. There was no more roaring, but the silence was even more oppressive. Some villagers who had been suspicious of the story began to bring rice, water, and wildflowers to place at the base of the Tiger Mother Tree, not out of fear, but out of deep respect. The rainy season was more lush than ever before. The stream was strong and clear. The once dry trees were green again. Herds of animals went out to forage without hiding, and on some nights, the moonlight would shine through the gaps in the trees, showing the shadow of an old woman walking slowly beside two tigers, one big, one small. Sometimes, her breath would be heard through the treetops, like a gentle and powerful whisper. Whoever loved the forest will love back. No one knew if she was still alive. No one was sure if she was a human or a spirit, but everyone knew that something was still watching in the shadows of the trees, and would not let anyone harm this place again for a second time. One night, the sky was illuminated by the full moon. A mist lingered above the treetops. The sound of leaves gently rustling was like a lullaby. Amidst the silence of the forest, a shadow appeared under a large tree. An old woman was leaning against the trunk. Her eyes stared up at the sky. Her breathing was soft and steady. A tigress and her cub were lying close together like a family. The moonlight shone on her body. The tiger stripes gradually faded. The wrinkled face was filled with peace. She closed her eyes, and in her last moment of consciousness, she heard the laughter of a little girl, a voice that had disappeared from this world. "Mother, let's go home." The old woman smiled. The last tear fell. Then the calm wind around her started to blow harder. Her body turned into a mist of light, floating into the sky. It disappeared with the moonlight that embraced it. The tigress raised her head, let out a gentle roar into the sky, before disappearing into the shadows of the trees with her cub. Since then, no one saw the old woman again. But the tiger mother blossomed golden flowers only once a year, on the full moon of the harvest season. And when the children asked, "Who was it that brought the forest back to life?" the old man would answer with a smile, "It was the old woman whose name no one remembers, but the whole forest always remembers her heartbeat."